Welcome to this explainer. I've been diving deep into how we actually analyze poetry, and honestly, it turns out we can essentially become literary detectives. It is just such a fascinating process. Instead of taking the printed words at face value, we get to peek behind the curtain. We're going to uncover hidden meanings, secret backstories, and the rich histories buried right there in the text. Today, we'll dig into the exact methods used to decode these hidden layers. I promise this journey is going to completely change the way you read and understand literature from here on out. So here's our detective's notepad for today. First, the power of context. Then we'll look at 3 specific clues: historical context, sociocultural context, and biographical context. After that, we'll crack a case study featuring Andrew Marvell, and finally, wrap things up with our detective's conclusion. All right, let's jump right into part 1, the power of context, and discovering the story behind every poem. So the absolute fundamental starting point of our investigation is realizing that poems, well, they're a lot like people. They have incredibly rich, often hidden backstories. A poem doesn't just pop out of thin air, right? It's born from a very specific time, place, and mind. So why do we actually need context to truly understand a story? Well, think about it. If someone just hands you a random sentence out of the blue, sure, you know the dictionary definitions of the words, but the deeper, actual meaning, that's completely lost. Words on their own are just the surface. We need a way to look beneath that surface. To make this crystal clear, let's look at an everyday analogy. Think about your Lola, your grandmother, or really any elder in your family. When she tells a story about her youth, you only truly get it if you know a few crucial things about her background. Let's say she tells you a funny, kind of quirky story about compulsively hiding specific foods under her bed. At first, it just sounds like an odd habit, right? But then you realize she grew up during a time of extreme wartime rationing. Suddenly, it's not a quirky habit at all. It was a survival mechanism. To really get it, you have to know what era she grew up in. You have to understand the specific cultural traditions that shaped her and her personal struggles. That era, those traditions, and her personal experience, they turn a simple anecdote into a profound piece of history. And you know what? Poetry operates on that exact same principle. So let's define this. Context refers to the entire set of circumstances surrounding a text's creation. We're talking the state of the world at that time, the culture and expectations of that specific society, and the actual lived life of the person who wrote the words. When I realized this, it totally shifted my perspective. We aren't just passive readers anymore. We're active investigators. We are literally searching for the conditions that force those specific words onto the page. Moving on to clue 1, historical context, connecting poetry to the events of its time. Historical context requires us to ask one big question. When exactly was this poem written? We have to look at the prevailing social and political climate during the text's creation, because major historical events completely alter the dictionary definition of the words being used. Imagine reading a poem about concepts like glory or sacrifice. If that poem was written during a long, comfortable era of peace, those words might be, highly philosophical or romanticized. But if that exact same poem was written during a grueling, devastating global conflict, those words, glory and sacrifice, they become incredibly gritty, traumatic, and grounded in profound loss. You simply cannot separate the art from the era it was forged in. A really brilliant example of historical context completely changing a text is the Filipino kundiman. Now, on the surface, just listening to the lyrics, the kundiman is a traditional Filipino love song. It sounds incredibly romantic, deep longing, devotion to a beautiful woman. But wait, apply that historical context, and everything shifts. These songs were actually written and popularized during the Spanish colonial period. At that time, open political protest against the colonizers was way too risky. It could easily lead to imprisonment or even death. So what did the artists do? They adapted. Those intensely romantic lyrics were actually hiding deep, passionate messages of love for their colonized country. The beautiful woman being serenaded, that was actually the Philippines itself. The Spanish authorities might walk by and just hear a lovely, soaring romance, completely oblivious that the Filipinos were literally singing a rallying cry for independence right in front of them. Without historical context, it's just a love song. With it, it's a brilliant act of quiet rebellion. Next up, clue 2, sociocultural context, unraveling norms, values, and social issues. So, sociocultural context reveals the cultural norms, values, and social hierarchies of the time. We really have to unravel the prevailing beliefs, the attitudes, the mores, and the traditions of a society. It is absolutely fascinating to look at how a poem navigates what was considered normal or taboo back then. A poet might be totally conforming to the strict social hierarchies of their day, or And this is where it gets good. They might be quietly rebelling against rigid gender roles, unfair class struggles, or religious dogmas. Understanding the cultural waters the poet was swimming in helps us decode their hidden symbols and metaphors. To really dig into this sociocultural lens, we can use some highly specific analytical approaches. For instance, a feminist approach. This gives us a lens to look specifically at how gender power dynamics are operating within a text. We'd ask, who holds the power in a dialogue between a man and a woman in this poem? Is the female voice silenced, idealized, or is she given real agency? On the flip side, we have the Marxist approach, which focuses on the power dynamics of class and economics. With this lens, we're looking at how labor, wealth, and poverty dictate the character's fates. Does the poem highlight the exploitation of the poor by the wealthy? Both of these powerful approaches fall right under that sociocultural umbrella. They basically give us specialized glasses to clearly see the hidden social structures operating between the lines. All right, bringing us to clue 3, biographical context, the author's life, experiences, and beliefs. For this clue, we're turning our magnifying glass directly onto the author. Biographical context looks deeply at the poet's personal background, their lived experiences, their deeply held beliefs, and their social standing. A writer just does not write in a vacuum. Their day-to-day life heavily shapes the themes, the characters, and the overall voice of their poetry. I mean, think about it. If a poem is about the grueling, desperate hardships of poverty, it reads incredibly differently if we know the author actually grew up freezing on the city streets, versus if we find out the author was, say, an incredibly wealthy aristocrat sitting in a cozy mansion just imagining what poverty might feel like. The biography authenticates the text. Okay, time to put this into practice. Case study Andrew Marvell, applying the 3 lenses to a classic poem. There's this very famous line from Andrew Marvell's poem, To His Coy Mistress, and it goes like this: "Had we but whirled enough in time, this coyness lady were no crime." Now, on a purely literal level, this is your classic Carpe Diem poem. Carpe Diem basically means seize the day. The speaker in the poem is passionately urging a hesitant or coy woman to embrace love and physical intimacy immediately, before their time inevitably runs out and they grow old. It seems like a pretty straightforward, if slightly aggressive, romantic plea. But let's look closer. Let's apply our 3 new investigative tools. Let's systematically break down Marvell's context. Historically, this wasn't just some peaceful, idyllic era of romance. No, it was written during the incredibly violent and turbulent English Civil War era. The threat of sudden death was literally looming everywhere. That makes the idea of Carpe Diem not just a romantic gesture, but a terrifying reality. Biographically, Marvell wasn't just a swooning, daydreaming poet. He was a highly active, pragmatic politician in the 1600s, deeply engaged with the cutthroat power struggles of his day. And socioculturally, the poem is steeped in the strict 17th century expectations of women. Female modesty or coyness wasn't just a cute personal quirk. It was a strict societal demand, absolutely required for a woman's reputation and survival. So when we look at it through that sociocultural lens, it really makes you wonder about the true dynamics at play here. We have to ask, how does the language of Marvell's poem reinforce traditional gender roles? Is this male speaker actually trying to empower this woman to break free of oppressive societal rules? Or is he just using the chaos and fear of a turbulent, war-torn era to manipulate her into doing what he wants? By applying context, what looked like a simple love poem suddenly transforms into a highly complex, honestly slightly sinister web of gender dynamics, mortality, and political persuasion. Finally, we reach the detective's conclusion, bringing our investigation to a close. This roadmap reflects the incredibly satisfying shared journey we just took together. First, we warm up by understanding basic vocabulary and figures of speech, like similes and metaphors, because that's how we initially spot that language is operating beyond its literal meaning. Second, we learn our 3 deep contextual clues: historical, sociocultural, and biographical. Third, we actively apply that skill to complex poetry, completely deconstructing what seemed like a simple text. And finally, we reflect and assess our findings to uncover the true narrative. By putting all these contextual clues together, we undergo a major transformation as readers. We aren't just reading words anymore. We're essentially time traveling. We get to look completely beyond the surface of the page and actually interact with the true societal norms, the rich cultural values, and the very real human experiences that force those exact words into existence in the first place. As we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this to chew on. What are 2 new things you learned about context today? And what is one burning question you still have that you want to investigate next? Think about how context deeply shapes not just classic poetry, but absolutely every piece of communication. Every song, every news article, every single story you interact with daily. The world is full of hidden meaning just waiting to be uncovered. And now, you have the exact tools to find it. Thank you so much for exploring this with me, and keep reading between the lines.